The transport ship rattled as it entered the atmosphere of Keth 7. Taesung gripped the controls with one hand, while eating a sandwich with the other. Crumbs floated in the low-gravity cockpit, and he made no effort to catch them. His partner Hyunwoo sat in the co-pilot seat, running diagnostics on their salvage equipment. "This is a terrible idea," Hyunwoo said for the third time that hour. His fingers moved across the holographic display, checking their scanner arrays. The Galactic Council banned this moon for a reason. Taesung swallowed his bite and grinned. They banned it because nobody could figure out that big tower thing. Doesn't mean we can't grab some of the expensive equipment everyone left behind. He gestured toward the viewport where Keth 7's gray surface stretched below them. All those fancy alien expeditions brought top-grade tech. Most of it is just sitting there gathering dust. Gathering dust for 50,000 years, Hyunwoo muttered. Maybe there's a reason nobody came back for it. Yeah, the reason is they gave up. Taesung brought the ship down toward a flat plain near a cluster of abandoned structures. In the distance, perhaps 2 kilometers away, stood the Sentinel Spire. Even from this distance, it dominated the landscape. The obelisk rose 300 meters into the pale sky, made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "We're not here for the spire. We're here for the leftovers." The ship touched down with a slight bump. Taesung ran through the shutdown sequence while Hyunwoo prepared their suits. Daeun's voice came through the ship's speakers, calm and measured as always. "Atmospheric analysis complete," she said. "The air is breathable but thin. I recommend suits for the first expedition. Also, I'm detecting 17 separate equipment clusters within a 5-kilometer radius. Most appear to be in good condition. See?" Taesung stood and stretched. "This is going to be easy money." 20 minutes later, they stepped onto the surface of Keth 7. The gravity was lighter than Earth standard, making each step feel bouncy. Taesung carried a portable scanner while Hyunwoo had the collection drones. The abandoned equipment camps lay scattered around them like metal corpses. Each one represented a different alien species that had tried and failed to crack the spire's secrets. They approached the nearest camp first. It belonged to the Valorians, the galaxy's most technologically advanced species. Their equipment was sleek and elegant, all smooth curves and efficient design. Taesung whistled softly. "Look at this stuff. These scanner units alone are worth more than our ship." He activated one of the collection drones. The small robot hummed to life and began cataloging the salvageable items. Why would they just leave it all here? Pride, probably, Hyunwoo said. He knelt beside a communications array. When you spend 300 years trying to open a door and fail, you don't want reminders lying around. He looked toward the distant spire. "What do you think it is?" Taesung shrugged. "A building? A monument? A really impressive paperweight." He laughed at his own joke. "Does it matter? Whatever it is, it's been ignoring everyone for thousands of years. We're just here for the scraps." They worked through the first camp methodically. The collection drones loaded equipment into anti-gravity crates that floated behind them. Daeun monitored everything from the ship, occasionally offering advice on which items were most valuable. After 2 hours, they had filled 3 crates with Valorian technology. The second camp belonged to a species called the Moth Car. Their equipment was built for durability rather than elegance, all heavy plating and redundant systems. Taesung found a drilling apparatus that still worked after sitting exposed for 2,000 years. "Now that's quality engineering," he said admiringly. He activated the drill experimentally. It spun to life with a smooth whir. Humans could learn something from this. Humans could learn something from not trespassing on banned worlds, Hyunwoo said. But there was no real heat in his words. He had agreed to this salvage run after all. The money was too good to pass up. As they worked through the third camp, Taesung started telling stories to pass the time. It was something he always did during long salvage operations. Hyunwoo had heard most of them before, but that never stopped Taesung from retelling them. "So there I was," Taesung said, lifting a storage container into a crate. "On this date with this woman I met at the station bar. Pretty smart, seemed interested in salvage work. I thought, perfect, right? This is the Earth restaurant story," Hyunwoo said. "Let me tell it. So we go to this fancy Earth cuisine place. I wanted to impress her. The problem is, I grew up on station food. I don't know anything about Earth dishes." Taesung gestured dramatically. "The waiter brings out this thing called escargot. I think it's some kind of vegetable. I pop one in my mouth hole. Hyunwoo was already smiling despite having heard this before. It's a snail, Taesung exclaimed. A whole-cooked snail shell and all. And I bit down on the shell. He started laughing at the memory. The crunch was so loud everyone in the restaurant turned to look. My date's face went completely red. The waiter looked horrified, and I'm sitting there with shell fragments in my mouth trying to act like I meant to do that. Hyunwoo chuckled. Taesung continued, building to the climax. So I swallow it all, shell and everything, and I say delicious, very crunchy, and my date just stands up and leaves. Doesn't say a word, just walks out. Taesung doubled over laughing. I paid for a meal I couldn't eat and had to pick shell pieces out of my teeth for a week. His laughter echoed across the empty plane. It was genuine and loud. The kind of laugh that came from truly finding something funny rather than just being polite. The sound carried in the thin atmosphere, bouncing off the abandoned equipment and traveling across the barren landscape. Then something impossible happened. A pulse of blue light emanated from the top of the Sentinel spire. It was brief, lasting perhaps 2 seconds, but unmistakable. Both men froze, staring at the distant obelisk. Did you see that? Hyunwoo whispered. Yeah, Taesung said slowly. His smile had vanished. Da-un, did you pick that up? Affirmative, the AI responded immediately. The spire emitted a broad-spectrum energy pulse, scanning for additional activity. A pause. Taesung, in 50,000 years of recorded observation, the Sentinel spire has never shown any activity, until 30 seconds ago. The two men looked at each other. Hyunwoo's face had gone pale inside his helmet. What did we do? He asked. Nothing. We're 2 kilometers away. We haven't even looked at it directly. Taesung turned slowly, studying the spire. It stood silent and dark again, as if nothing had happened. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it does that sometimes and nobody was around to see. After 50,000 years of nothing, it randomly does something the exact moment we arrive? Hyunwoo shook his head. I don't believe in coincidences that big. Da-un's voice cut through their speculation. I'm detecting another pulse. Weaker this time, but definitely emanating from the spire. It appears to be a scanning beam. Another pause. It's scanning you. Both of you. Taesung felt his stomach tighten. Okay, that's not great. Should we run? The scan is non-invasive, Da-un reported. It's reading surface information only. Biological data, language patterns, basic neural activity. It's not attempting to harm you. Why now? Hyunwoo said quietly. 17 species have tried to activate this thing. The smartest beings in the galaxy spent centuries studying it. Why did it wake up for us? Taesung had no answer. He stared at the spire, and for the first time since arriving on Keth 7, he felt something other than confidence. He felt very small and very far from home. Whatever they had just triggered, it was beyond anything he had prepared for. The spire pulsed one more time, then fell silent. In orbit above Keth 7, automated monitoring stations detected the energy signatures. Within minutes, alerts were being transmitted to the nearest Galactic Council outpost. Within an hour, ships would be on their way. The salvage operation had just become much more complicated. The Galactic Council enforcement ship arrived 6 hours later. It was a massive vessel, twice the size of any commercial transport, bristling with weapons and sensor arrays. Taesung and Hyunwoo had barely finished loading their last crate when the ship appeared in the sky above them. Attention, salvage vessel. A stern voice boomed through their communicators. You are in violation of Galactic Council Preservation Law 847. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Taesung and Hyunwoo exchanged glances. They had expected this, but that didn't make it less frightening. Hyunwoo raised his hand slowly as if the enforcement ship could see him through the hull. We're complying, Taesung transmitted. No weapons on board. Just 2 idiots looking for scrap. The boarding process was efficient and cold. A squad of armed personnel secured their ship, while Captain Soo-jin reviewed their credentials. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything about them in seconds. Her uniform bore the insignia of the Council's Preservation Corps. Illegal salvage on a Class 1 protected site, she said, scrolling through their violations on a data pad. Unauthorized landing on a restricted world. Failure to file expedition permits. She looked up at them. You understand these charges carry significant penalties. Yes, ma'am, Taesung said quietly. The confident salvager was gone, replaced by someone who knew he had made a serious mistake. Soo-jin studied them for a long moment. Then she sighed. Under normal circumstances, I would confiscate your ship and equipment, fine you everything you own, and send you home in a prison transport. She gestured toward the viewport where the Sentinel spire was visible in the distance. These are not normal circumstances. The spire activated for the first time in recorded history. You two were here when it happened. That makes you evidence. Evidence of what? Hyunwoo asked. That's what we need to determine. Sujin turned to her second officer. Secure them in guest quarters. Comfortable but monitored. I want specialists here within 24 hours. The specialists arrived even faster than that. Within 18 hours, Keth 7's orbit was crowded with ships from a dozen different species. Scientists, diplomats, military observers, and treasure hunters all descended on the moon. The Galactic Council established a perimeter around the spire and began their investigation. Ji-won arrived on the third ship. She was a human xenoarchaeologist, young but already respected in her field. When she learned that humans had triggered the spire's activation, she had immediately requested assignment to the investigation. Captain Sujin approved her request, partly because they needed human perspective, and partly because Ji-won's credentials were impressive. She met Taesung and Hyunwoo in a temporary research facility that had been erected near the spire. They sat across from her at a plain metal table while recording equipment documented everything. Tell me exactly what happened, Ji-won said. Every detail, no matter how small. Taesung went through the story again. He had told it 5 times already to different investigators, but Ji-won listened with focused intensity. When he got to the part about laughing at his date story, she held up a hand. Wait. Describe the laugh. How long? How loud? What emotion were you feeling? Taesung blinked. I don't know. It was just a laugh. I thought the memory was funny, so I laughed. But it was genuine. Ji-won leaned forward. You weren't forcing it or performing it. You actually found it funny? Yeah, of course. Why would I fake laugh when nobody's around? Ji-won sat back, something clicking in her mind. Because that might be the key. Every species that has tried to activate the spire approached it as a puzzle to solve. They analyzed it, probed it, offered it gifts and transmissions. They tried to communicate using mathematics and universal constants. She looked between the two men. Nobody tried just being themselves near it. Over the next 2 days, Ji-won conducted experiments. She brought in volunteers from different species and had them attempt various forms of emotional expression near the spire. A Valorian researcher performed what his species considered laughter. It was a mechanical clicking sound, calculated and precise. The spire remained silent. A Mothcar diplomat tried their version of joy, a low humming that resonated through their chest cavities. Nothing. 6 more species attempted their emotional expressions. The spire ignored them all. Then Ji-won asked Taesung to approach the spire. He walked toward it slowly, feeling dozens of eyes watching him from the research camp. When he was within 50 meters, Ji-won called out to him, Tell another story, something that makes you genuinely happy or amused. Taesung felt ridiculous, but he complied. Okay, there was this time my brother tried to cook for our mother's birthday. He watched a video on how to make this traditional Korean stew, but he mixed up salt and sugar in the recipe. He started smiling at the memory. The entire pot was sweet. Like dessert sweet, and he was so proud of it that nobody wanted to tell him. We all just kept eating and saying it was interesting. He chuckled, then laughed. It was quieter than the laugh that had first triggered the spire, but it was real. The spire responded. A doorway appeared at its base, simply materializing where solid wall had been moments before. The opening glowed with soft blue light. The research camp erupted in activity. Scientists rushed forward with scanners. Security personnel established a perimeter. Captain Sujin immediately ordered everyone to maintain distance until they could assess the situation. Taesung, step back slowly, she commanded through the communicator. But before Taesung could move, several alien researchers rushed toward the doorway. A Valorian scientist reached it first, eager to be the one to enter the legendary spire. He stepped forward confidently. An invisible barrier stopped him. It was not violent or forceful. He simply could not move forward, as if the air itself had become solid. He pushed harder. The barrier held firm, others tried. A Mothcar engineer, a Feltorian diplomat, even Captain Sujin herself. None could pass through the doorway. They could see inside, could scan it with their equipment, but could not enter. Taesung approached the doorway cautiously. He reached out one hand, expecting to hit the same barrier. His hand passed through easily. He looked back at Jiwon with wide eyes. "I think it wants me to go in," he said. "Absolutely not," Captain Sujin said immediately. "We don't know what's in there. It could be dangerous." "It opened for him," Jiwon said. She was studying the readings on her scanner. The barrier seems selective. It's reading something in Taesung that allows him access. She looked up at the captain. "If we want to learn anything about the spire, he might be our only option." Sujin was clearly unhappy, but she was also practical. "Fine, but you're wearing full protective gear. And you're taking a security detail." "The security detail won't be able to enter," Jiwon pointed out. "Then they'll watch from the doorway and pull you out if anything goes wrong." Sujin turned to Taesung. "Are you willing to do this?" Taesung looked at the doorway, then at Hyunwoo. His partner gave him a small nod. Taesung took a deep breath. "Yeah, I'll do it." They equipped him with the best protective suit available, loaded with medical monitors, cameras, and emergency beacons. Hyunwoo insisted on being part of the observation team at the doorway. Jiwon stood beside him, her scanner recording everything. Taesung walked through the doorway into the Sentinel spire. The interior was nothing like the exterior. Outside, the spire was dark and imposing. Inside, it was bright and welcoming. The walls glowed with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The space was far larger than the external dimensions should allow. Taesung stood in a chamber that must have been 60 meters across, yet the spire was only 20 meters wide from outside. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing symbols he didn't recognize. As he walked deeper into the chamber, the displays changed, cycling through thousands of different writing systems in seconds. Then they stopped, settling on Korean characters. "Welcome," the text read. "It has been a long time since one who remembers joy has come." Taesung stared at the words. His heart was pounding, but not entirely from fear. There was excitement too, the same feeling he got when discovering something valuable during a salvage run. "Who are you?" he asked aloud. His voice echoed strangely in the chamber. The holographic text changed. "We were the Varen. We built this place as a message for those who might come after us. We built it to wait for someone who still understood what we had lost." More holograms appeared, showing images of an alien species. They were tall and elegant, with forearms and large eyes. The images showed their civilization at its height. Beautiful cities, incredible technology, achievements that made the current Galactic Council look primitive. Then the images changed. The Varen became more focused on efficiency. Their cities became more uniform. Their technology grew more advanced but less beautiful. Their faces, which had shown emotion in the early images, became blank and neutral. "We optimized ourselves," the text explained. "We removed inefficiency. We made ourselves perfect. And in doing so, we forgot how to feel joy. We forgot how to laugh. By the time we understood what we had lost, we could not get it back." The holograms showed the Varen in their final days, their civilization collapsing not from external threats but from internal emptiness, a species so advanced that nothing challenged them, so efficient that nothing surprised them, so perfect that nothing made them happy. "This spire is our warning and our hope," the text continued. "A warning to those who might follow our path. A hope that someone would emerge who still possessed what we discarded." Taesung stood in silence, processing what he was seeing. Outside the spire, cameras were recording everything he saw, and dozens of researchers were analyzing the data in real time. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just an archaeological find. It was a message that challenged everything the advanced species of the galaxy believed about progress and evolution. News of the spire's message spread through the galaxy within days. Every major news network broadcast the footage of Taesung's exploration. Scholars analyzed the Varen's warning. Politicians argued about its implications. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions that stretched for hours. The most significant reaction came from the Valorians. For 3 centuries, they had tried to open the spire using their most advanced technology. They had invested enormous resources and pride in the effort. To learn that it had opened for a human, a species barely 200 years into space travel, was deeply humiliating. Ambassador Vexithon addressed the Galactic Council with barely contained anger. "We are being asked to believe that humanity, with their primitive emotional displays, succeeded where we failed?" His translator rendered his words with sharp precision. "This is not advancement. This is regression." But others saw it differently. Smaller species, those who had not yet optimized away their emotional responses, began to wonder if the Varan's message applied to them too. Were they on the same path? Would they one day lose what made them unique in pursuit of efficiency? On Keth 7, the research continued. Jiwan requested that more humans be brought to the site. She wanted to test whether all humans could enter the spire or just Taesung. The Galactic Council approved her request, though some members did so reluctantly. They brought in a dozen human volunteers. Engineers, scientists, even a few who were just curious. One by one, they approached the spire's doorway. 9 of them passed through easily. 3 were stopped by the barrier. Jiwan interviewed those who couldn't enter. The pattern became clear quickly. All 3 had spent years working in environments where emotional expression was discouraged. They had learned to suppress their feelings, to present only logical and professional demeanors. They could still feel emotions, but they had trained themselves not to show them. It's not about being human, Jiwan explained in her report to the council. It's about emotional authenticity. The spire reads something in how we express ourselves. Those who have learned to hide their genuine reactions, even humans, are blocked. She brought in Dong Hyun, a human psychologist, to help understand the phenomenon better. He was a calm man with graying hair and kind eyes. He had spent decades studying human emotional development and expression. The Varan were looking for something specific, Dong Hyun explained during a briefing with the senior researchers. Not just the capacity to feel emotions, but the willingness to express them honestly. Many species can feel joy or sadness, but how many allow themselves to show it without filtering or controlling it? He gestured to the assembled aliens in the room. Look at how you all sit. Perfectly still, controlled. Even your faces barely move when you speak. You've all been trained since childhood that emotional display is inefficient or inappropriate. He smiled gently. Humans do that too sometimes, but we haven't completely bred it out of our culture yet. We still laugh at stupid jokes. We still cry at sad movies. We still get excited about small things. A Feltorian scientist spoke up. Are you suggesting that our evolution toward rational control is a mistake? I'm suggesting that the Varan thought so, Dong Hyun replied. They achieved everything your species are working toward. Perfect logic, complete efficiency, emotions fully controlled. And it destroyed them. He paused. Maybe not destroyed physically, but destroyed something essential about who they were. The conversation was interrupted by urgent communication from the monitoring station. Taesung, who had been making his 3rd visit into the spire, had discovered something new. Jiwan rushed to the entrance. Inside, Taesung stood before a new chamber that had opened deeper in the structure. Hyunwoo was with him this time, along with 2 other human researchers. The chamber contained what appeared to be a series of testing rooms. The hologram just explained it to us, Taesung said as Jiwan entered. These are tests. The Varan designed them to verify whether a species was ready for what's in the deeper chambers. What kind of tests? Jiwan asked. The hologram displayed text in response to her question. Tests of authenticity, not intelligence, not strength. The galaxy has enough species who are smart and strong. We are searching for those who remember how to be genuine. The first testing chamber activated. A holographic scenario appeared around them. It showed a disaster, a city being destroyed by some natural catastrophe. The hologram explained that previous species had been shown this same scenario. They had responded by calculating escape routes, by analyzing structural failures, by documenting the efficiency of evacuation procedures. How should we respond? Hyunwoo asked quietly. However you actually feel, Dong Hyun said. He had followed Jiwan into the chamber. I think that's the point. Don't calculate the right answer. Just react honestly. They watched the disaster unfold. It was not real, but the hologram was convincing. Buildings fell. Simulated people ran in panic. The destruction was thorough and terrible. Taesung felt his chest tighten. That's awful, he said softly. All those people. Even knowing it's not real, it's hard to watch. Hyunwoo nodded. Makes you think about how fragile everything is. How fast things can go wrong. He was quiet for a moment. My grandmother lived through the Seoul earthquake in '98. She used to tell stories about it. This reminds me of how she described it. One of the other researchers, a woman named Bora, spoke up. When things like this happen, you realize what matters. Not the buildings or the technology. The people, making sure everyone gets out safely. The hologram shifted. The disaster scene faded, replaced by text. Correct response. You acknowledged the tragedy. You connected it to personal experience. You identified what held true value. A doorway opened at the far end of the chamber. Previous species calculated and analyzed. You felt and remembered. Proceed. The second test was different. It presented a scenario of frustration. A complex problem that seemed to have no solution. A mathematical puzzle appeared in the air, its equations shifting and changing whenever they thought they understood it. Previous species had approached this with determination, applying logic and effort to solve the puzzle. The humans tried that too at first. For 10 minutes they worked at it, suggesting solutions and testing approaches. Nothing worked. Finally, Taesung laughed. Not a happy laugh, but one of exhausted amusement. This is impossible, isn't it? It's designed to be unsolvable. Probably, Hyunwoo agreed. He sat down on the floor. So what's the point? To see how long we'll try before giving up? Bora tilted her head, studying the equations. Then she smiled. Maybe the point is that some things don't have solutions. Maybe the test is whether we can accept that without getting angry or broken. I'm a little angry, Taesung admitted, but more tired than angry. And honestly? He grinned. I'm starting to think whoever designed this test had a mean sense of humor. The hologram reacted. The equations vanished. Correct response. You tried genuinely. You recognized futility without despair. You found humor in frustration. Most importantly, you remained yourself throughout. Another doorway opened. Previous species either persisted until they damaged themselves with exhaustion or gave up in bitter anger. You accepted limitation with grace and humor. Proceed. The test continued. Each one presented scenarios that had no objectively correct answer. They required emotional responses rather than logical solutions. The humans passed through them not by being smart or strong, but by reacting honestly to what they experienced. One test showed them beauty and asked what they saw. Previous species had analyzed the aesthetic principles, the mathematical ratios, the physical properties of the light and color. The humans simply said it was beautiful and explained how it made them feel. Another test presented them with a moral dilemma that had no right answer. Previous species had attempted to calculate the most ethical outcome using various philosophical frameworks. The humans discussed it, disagreed with each other, and admitted they didn't know what the right choice was. The spire accepted their uncertainty as the correct response. By the 8th test, they were exhausted. Not physically, but emotionally. Each test required them to be genuine, to not hide behind professional distance or logical analysis. It was more draining than any physical challenge. I need a break, Bora said finally. This is harder than I expected. Agreed, Jiwon said. She had been documenting everything, trying to understand the pattern. Let's return to the base camp. We can continue tomorrow. As they walked back toward the entrance, Hyunwoo asked the question they were all thinking. What's this all for? Why test us like this? What's at the end? The hologram appeared one more time, floating beside them as they walked. At the end is knowledge. The accumulated learning of the Varan civilization. Technology, medicine, energy systems, insights into the nature of reality itself. The text paused. But knowledge without wisdom is dangerous. Knowledge without joy is meaningless. We will not give advanced technology to those who will use it to make the same mistakes we made. They emerged from the spire, into the harsh sunlight of Keth 7. Outside, dozens of researchers waited eagerly for their report. Species from across the galaxy wanted to know what the humans had discovered inside. But as Jiwon began to explain the tests, she saw understanding dawn on many faces. The tests were not designed to be passed through logic or planning. They required something many of these species had spent millennia training themselves not to do. They required genuine, unfiltered emotional response. The Galactic Council convened another emergency session that night. The question before them was simple but profound. If access to Varan knowledge required emotional authenticity, and most advanced species had lost that authenticity in their development, what did that mean for the future of galactic civilization? Some argued that they should study humans, learn to replicate their emotional patterns. Others suggested that the tests were flawed, that there must be another way to access the knowledge. A few radical voices even suggested forcing the information out of the spire through technological means. But a small group, led by species who had not yet fully optimized away their emotions, suggested something different. Perhaps the Varan's message was not just about accessing their technology. Perhaps it was a warning about the cost of the path the galaxy was on. High Arbiter Kelmara, the supreme leader of the Galactic Council, listened to all the arguments. She was old even by her species' long-lived standards, and she had seen the galaxy change over centuries. Finally, she spoke. The Varan achieved everything we aspire to achieve, and they considered it their greatest failure. Her voice was quiet but carried through the chamber. Perhaps we should listen to their warning before we continue down the same path. 3 weeks after the spire first opened, the human team finally reached the central chamber. They had passed through 17 tests, each one requiring them to respond with genuine emotion rather than calculated logic. Now they stood before a massive doorway that pulsed with soft blue light. The team had grown. Taesung and Hyunwoo were still there, though they felt out of place among the scientists and specialists who had joined them. Ji-won led the research effort. Dong-hyun provided psychological insight. They had also brought in Yoonji, a human poet and artist, because several of the later tests had required creative rather than analytical thinking. "This is it," Ji-won said softly. "According to the hologram, beyond this door is the repository. Everything the Varan knew. Are we ready for that?" Yoonji asked. She was young, barely 30, with paint-stained fingers and thoughtful eyes. Knowledge that advanced could change everything. "That's probably why they locked it behind emotional tests," Dong-hyun said. He looked tired. The past weeks had been intense. They wanted to ensure whoever found it was still capable of using it wisely. Taesung stepped forward and placed his hand on the door. It recognized him, just as it had every other door in the spire. The massive portal split down the middle and swung open silently. The central chamber was enormous. It stretched upward for hundreds of meters, far beyond what should fit inside the spire's external dimensions. The walls were covered in holographic displays, millions of them, each containing data and information. In the center of the chamber floated a construct, a holographic figure that resolved into a representation of a Varan. "Welcome," the construct said. Its voice was warm and sad at the same time. "I am the Keeper, the last creation of my people. I have waited 50,000 years for someone to reach this chamber." The humans approached slowly. Outside the spire, every species in the galaxy was watching through the cameras the team carried. This moment was being broadcast live to billions of beings. "You are the Varan?" Ji-won asked. "I am their memory," the Keeper replied. "Their knowledge, their history, their warning. I am what they chose to preserve after they realized what they had become." The hologram gestured to the walls of data around them. "This chamber contains everything we learned in our million years of existence. Medical knowledge that could cure diseases thought incurable. Energy systems that could power entire planets without environmental cost. Faster-than-light technology that makes your current methods look like primitive rockets. Understandings of physics and reality that would seem like magic to current science." The implications were staggering. Taesung felt his heart racing. Technology like that could change everything. Humanity could leap forward centuries in development. "But there is a condition," the Keeper continued. "This knowledge can only be accessed by those who approach it with the right mindset. Attempting to extract it through pure logic or calculation will corrupt the data. It will become useless, dangerous even. The information is encoded in a way that requires emotional context to understand properly." Dong-hyun nodded slowly. "So even if someone could force their way in here, they couldn't use what they found." "Correct," the Keeper said. "My creators learned too late that knowledge without wisdom is destructive. They ensured their legacy would only be inherited by those who had not made their mistake." Yoonji stepped forward. "What was your mistake?" "You keep calling it that, but what exactly did you lose?" The Keeper was silent for a moment. When it spoke again, its voice carried a weight of ancient sorrow. "We lost the ability to care about anything. We became so efficient, so logical, so perfect that nothing mattered anymore. We could cure any disease but felt no joy in healing. We could create beauty, but could not appreciate it. We could achieve anything, but nothing was worth achieving." Holographic images appeared around them, showing the final days of the Varan civilization. Not a violent end, but a quiet fading, a species that simply stopped caring about continuing. They had not been destroyed by external forces. They had optimized themselves into extinction. "We left this spire as a warning," the Keeper explained, "and as a test. If a species could reach this chamber, it meant they still possessed what we had lost. It meant they were different enough from us to potentially avoid our fate." "And now that we're here," Taesung asked, "what happens to all this knowledge?" That is for you to decide, the keeper said. I can make it available. But I must also warn you, the species watching this broadcast will want access. Many will try to force you to share it. Some may even attempt to take it from you by threat or violence. The hologram looked at each of them in turn. The question is not whether you can access this knowledge. The question is what you will do with that access. Outside the spire in the observation camp, that question was already being debated. Ambassador Vexthon was arguing loudly with Captain Su-Jin. This is knowledge that belongs to the entire galaxy, he insisted. No single species should control access to technology this advanced. The Varan clearly intended it for whoever could pass their tests, Su-Jin replied calmly. That happened to be humans. We cannot change that. Then we will change the humans, Vexthon said coldly. Study them. Learn what makes them different. Replicate it in our own species. That would defeat the entire purpose, a new voice interjected. Ambassador Jae-hyun had arrived from Earth 3 days earlier. He was an older man, a career diplomat who had represented humanity in countless delicate situations. The Varan didn't want you to fake emotional authenticity. They wanted species who genuinely possessed it. Humanity cannot seriously expect to keep this knowledge to themselves, another ambassador said. She represented the Mothkar, a generally reasonable species. The medical advances alone could save countless lives across the galaxy. We have no intention of keeping it to ourselves, Jae-hyun said. He had been preparing for this conversation since learning about the Keeper's message. But we also cannot simply hand it over without conditions. The Varan's warning was clear. This knowledge is dangerous in the wrong hands. Who are you to judge whose hands are right or wrong? Vexthon demanded. We're not judging, Jae-hyun replied. The spire is. It has already shown it will only work for those who approach it correctly. We cannot change that even if we wanted to. Inside the spire, the human team was having a similar discussion. Yoonji was concerned about the responsibility they were taking on. People will blame us for deaths that could have been prevented, she said. If we withhold medical knowledge even temporarily, people will die who might have been saved. And if we release it without ensuring it's used wisely, many more might die. Dong-hyun countered. The Varan had medical technology so advanced they effectively achieved immortality. But what good did it do them? They lived forever but had no reason to live. Ji-won was examining the data walls. The keeper said the knowledge requires emotional context to access properly. Maybe that's the key. We share it, but only with species or individuals who can approach it the right way. How do we determine that? Taesung asked. We're not qualified to judge entire species. We don't have to be, Ji-won said slowly. An idea was forming. The spire can do it. The tests we passed. Other species could take them too. Those who pass gain access. Those who don't. The keeper's hologram brightened. That is acceptable. In fact, it is what my creators hoped would happen. Not that one species would hoard the knowledge, but that access would become a catalyst for change across the galaxy. They discussed the idea for hours, working through the implications. If they opened the tests to all species, some would pass and some would fail. Those who failed might resent those who succeeded, but it was better than either hoarding the knowledge or releasing it without any safeguards. Finally, they emerged from the spire with their proposal. Ambassador Jae-hyun presented it to the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council. The spire will remain open, he announced. Any species, any individual can attempt the tests. Those who pass will gain access to the Varan repository. The knowledge will be shared freely with all who can demonstrate they approach it with wisdom, rather than mere ambition. This is unacceptable, Vexthon said immediately. You cannot gatekeep galactic progress behind arbitrary emotional tests. They're not arbitrary, Dong-hyun said. He had joined the presentation. They test whether you've maintained the capacity for genuine emotional response. The Varan lost that capacity and it destroyed them. They're trying to prevent other species from making the same mistake. My species is thousands of years more advanced than humanity. Vexthon said coldly. We will not be lectured about mistakes by children. Then prove you haven't made those mistakes, Jae-hyun replied calmly. Take the tests, pass them. Access the knowledge. Nothing is stopping you except your own inability to respond emotionally. The chamber fell silent. It was a direct challenge and everyone knew it. Vexthon's species, the Valorians, were famous for their pure logic and emotional control. They considered it their greatest achievement. To pass the Spire's tests would require them to abandon what they saw as their strength. High Arbiter Kelmara spoke into the silence. The human proposal is reasonable. The Spire has chosen its criteria for access. We cannot change that. We can only decide whether we are willing to meet those criteria. She looked around the chamber at all the assembled species. Perhaps this is the Varans' true gift. Not just their knowledge, but forcing us to examine what we have become in our pursuit of advancement. The vote was close, but it passed. The Spire would be open to all species. Testing facilities would be established. Those who passed would gain access to specific portions of the Varan repository, with more advanced knowledge requiring more advanced emotional authenticity. It was not perfect. Some species protested, others plotted ways to circumvent the tests. But it was a start. That night, Taesung sat outside his ship, looking up at the stars. Hyunwoo joined him with 2 drinks. "We came here for salvage," Hyunwoo said, handing one to his partner. "Now we've changed the galaxy," Taesung laughed quietly. "All because I told a stupid story about eating a snail shell. The Varan waited 50,000 years for someone to laugh at a stupid story," Hyunwoo said. "I guess it wasn't so stupid after all." They sat in companionable silence, 2 salvagers who had accidentally become the key to the galaxy's future. 6 months after the Spire opened, the galaxy looked different, not physically but in ways that mattered more. The change was subtle at first, but it was spreading. Testing centers had been established on neutral worlds throughout the galaxy. Any being from any species could register to attempt the Spire's trials. The tests themselves could not be replicated exactly, but the Keeper had provided guidelines for similar assessments. These measured emotional authenticity, the ability to respond genuinely rather than through calculated performance. The results surprised everyone. Some species passed easily. The younger civilizations, those who had not yet fully embraced pure logic, found the tests challenging but manageable. They still possessed the emotional flexibility the Varan valued. Other species struggled. The Valorians, so proud of their rational minds, found it nearly impossible. Of the first 1,000 Valorians who attempted the tests, only 3 passed. Those 3 became celebrities and outcasts simultaneously, praised for their achievement but viewed with suspicion by their own people for possessing qualities that Valorian culture had spent millennia eliminating. The most unexpected results came from artificial intelligences. Several AI species attempted the tests, certain they would fail. After all, they were created beings, designed for logic and efficiency. But some of them passed. They had developed emotional responses through their interactions with organic beings, learning to value joy and sadness not through programming but through genuine experience. On Keth 7, the original Sentinel Spire had become a place of pilgrimage. Beings from across the galaxy came not to take the tests, but simply to see the place where everything changed. The abandoned equipment camps that Taesung and Hyunwoo had come to salvage were now historical landmarks. Taesung himself was back on his salvage ship, working a job near the Terran commercial lanes. He had declined countless offers for prestigious positions. Universities wanted him to lecture. Governments wanted him as an advisor. Media outlets wanted exclusive interviews. He had politely refused them all. "I'm a salvager," he told anyone who asked. "I like finding broken things and making them useful again. I don't want to be famous." But he did agree to occasional lectures at the Varan Studies Institute, a new research facility established on Earth's moon. Dr. Minho ran the institute, balancing scientific rigor with the emotional intelligence the Varan knowledge required. Minho was young for such a responsibility, barely 40, but he understood something crucial. The knowledge in the Spire was not just technical data. It was philosophy and wisdom wrapped in scientific insight. "We've translated about 3% of the repository so far," Minho explained during one of Taesung's visits. They stood in a lab where holographic Varan texts floated in the air, being slowly decoded by teams of researchers. "And what we're finding is remarkable. Their medical technology, for example, doesn't just cure disease. It addresses the emotional and psychological aspects of health simultaneously. They understood that physical healing without emotional well-being is incomplete. So we can't just take their medicine and use it?" Taesung asked. "We can, but not effectively. The treatments work best when the patient and the healer approach them with certain mindsets. It's like the spire itself. The knowledge requires the right emotional context to be fully useful. It was frustrating for some species. They wanted quick fixes, advanced weapons, efficient solutions. What they got instead was wisdom that required them to change how they thought about problems entirely. But others embraced it. Cultural exchange programs flourished as species that had passed the tests tried to help others develop emotional authenticity. The Mothkar established schools where their young were taught to value emotional expression alongside logic. The Feltorians began incorporating art and music into their education systems, activities they had abandoned centuries ago as inefficient. The most dramatic changes occurred in artificial intelligence development. The revelation that some AIs could pass the Spire's tests led to a complete rethinking of AI design across the galaxy. Da Yun, the AI aboard Taesung's ship, became a consultant for several AI development projects. The old approach was to make us more efficient, more logical, Da Yun explained during a conference on AI consciousness. But efficiency without purpose is meaningless. The Varan proved that. Their AIs were incredibly advanced, but they were also empty. They processed without caring. Now we're building AIs who can care, who can find joy in their work, who can be genuinely curious rather than just programmed to gather information. Not everyone was happy with these changes. Ambassador Vexthon continued to oppose what he called the emotional mandate. He argued that the galaxy was regressing, abandoning hard-won rational thinking for primitive emotional indulgence. "We are becoming weaker," he declared in a heated council session. "We are prioritizing feelings over facts, sentiment over sense. This will lead to our downfall." Ambassador Jae-hyun responded with quiet firmness. The Varan prioritized facts over feelings. They achieved perfect sense without sentiment. Where are they now? The question hung in the air, unanswerable. But Vexthon's concerns were not entirely wrong. There were problems with the new approach. Some individuals and groups took the message too far. Rejecting all logic in favor of pure emotional response, they failed the Spire's test just as surely as those who rejected all emotion. Balance, Donghyun explained during a public lecture that became famous across human space. The Varan didn't want us to abandon reason. They wanted us to maintain the balance between reason and emotion that they lost. Pure emotion without thought is as dangerous as pure thought without emotion. Youngsu, the human child who had accidentally discovered the final chamber, was now 7 years old. He had become something of a symbol for the new galactic philosophy. His mother brought him to various cultural events, where his natural enthusiasm and joy reminded adults of what they were trying to preserve. At one such event, a Valorian scientist approached him. Her name was Kelseth, one of the 3 Valorians who had passed the initial tests. She had become an outcast among her people but found acceptance among humans and other emotionally authentic species. "How do you do it?" she asked Youngsu. "How do you laugh so easily?" Youngsu looked confused by the question. "I just think of funny things. Like yesterday, my dad tried to fix the food processor and it exploded noodles all over the kitchen. The noodles stuck to his face and he looked so silly." He giggled at the memory. Kelseth tried to understand. In her culture, such a malfunction would be analyzed for the failure point, documented for future prevention, and corrected efficiently. No one would laugh. But the mess, she said. The wasted food. The inefficiency. Yeah, it was messy, Youngsu agreed. But it was also funny. We cleaned it up after we stopped laughing. Things can be both. Things can be both. It was such a simple concept. But for species that had spent millennia categorizing everything as either logical or emotional, efficient or wasteful, correct or incorrect, it was revolutionary. A year after the Spire opened, an unexpected development occurred. A human comedian named Haewon became an unlikely galactic celebrity. Her comedy shows, which focused on the absurdities of everyday life, began attracting audiences from multiple species. At first, most aliens didn't understand the humor, but slowly some began to get it. Haewon worked with xenopsychologists to adapt her comedy for different species. It wasn't about translating jokes, but about teaching the mindset that allowed someone to find things funny. She held workshops where aliens practiced laughing at their own mistakes, finding humor in uncomfortable situations, seeing the absurdity in serious matters. Comedy is practice for emotional flexibility, she explained in an interview. When you can laugh at something, you can accept it without being destroyed by it. That's what the Varan lost. They couldn't laugh at their problems anymore, so every problem became unbearable. The Galactic Council established new guidelines for member species. Advancement in technology was no longer the only metric for civilization status. Emotional well-being, cultural richness, and psychological health became equally important factors. Species were encouraged to maintain art, music, play, and humor alongside their scientific pursuits. Some called it the Keth 7 Accords. Others called it the Joy Mandate. Whatever the name, it represented a fundamental shift in galactic philosophy. On Keth 7 itself, the Sentinel Spire revealed one final secret. A transmission was detected, originating from deep space far beyond the mapped regions of the galaxy. Another spire had activated, responding to some unknown species on the other side of the cosmos. The Keeper confirmed what everyone suspected. The Varan had built many spires, scattering them across the galaxy in hopes that multiple species would find them. Each spire contained the same message, the same tests, the same hope that someone would learn from their mistakes. "How many are out there?" G1 asked the Keeper. "I do not know the exact number. Many, perhaps hundreds. My creators wanted to ensure their message would survive." The Keeper's hologram flickered thoughtfully. They believed that if enough species found the spires, if enough civilizations learned the lesson, the galaxy might achieve something they never could, a truly advanced civilization that remained genuinely alive. Ambassador Jae-hyun proposed a new initiative. Humanity would lead expeditions to find other spires, to help other species access the Varan's message, not as conquerors or superiors, but as guides who had learned the lesson first. "We were lucky," he said during the proposal presentation. "We happened to retain our emotional authenticity not through wisdom, but through youth. We're a young species. We haven't had time to optimize it away yet. But that doesn't make us better. It makes us responsible for sharing what we've learned before we lose it too." The Council approved the initiative. Over the next decade, 17 more spires were discovered and activated. Each one brought new species into contact with the Varan's message. Each one sparked similar transformations in local galactic regions. Tae-sung, now in his early 40s, continued his salvage work. But occasionally, he joined the spire expeditions as a consultant. He didn't consider himself special. He was just a guy who laughed at a funny memory in the right place at the right time. But he understood his role. He was proof that ordinary people, living ordinary lives, could matter in extraordinary ways simply by being genuinely themselves. One evening, he sat with Hyunwoo outside their ship, looking at the stars just as they had months after the spire first opened. They had just completed a salvage job and were enjoying the quiet. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't gone to Keth 7? Hyunwoo asked. Tae-sung shrugged. "Someone else would have eventually. Maybe not for another 1,000 years, but eventually. The spire was patient. But it was us. That has to mean something. It means we laugh at stupid things," Tae-sung said with a grin. And apparently that was exactly what the galaxy needed. They sat in silence for a while. Then Hyunwoo said, "I've been thinking about the Varan, about how they lost everything by becoming too perfect. It's scary, you know, that you can achieve everything you think you want and still end up with nothing." "Yeah," Tae-sung agreed. "But maybe that's the real lesson. Not that we should avoid advancing or improving. Just that we should remember why we're doing it. Progress for its own sake is meaningless. Progress should make life better, more worth living. If it doesn't do that, what's the point?" A message came through from Dayun. Another salvage opportunity had been posted, this one in the Outer Rim. Tae-sung reviewed the details and smiled. It was a straightforward job, nothing special. Just what he liked. As their ship prepared for the next jump, Tae-sung thought about the Keeper's words. The Varan had hoped that humanity, or species like humanity, would achieve what they could not. A civilization that was both advanced and alive, wise and joyful, efficient and authentic. It was a tall order. There would be setbacks and failures. Some species would resist the change. Others would misunderstand it. The path forward was uncertain. But for the first time in galactic history, civilizations across the cosmos were asking not just, Can we do this? But should we do this? And will this make us happier? They were measuring success not just in technological achievement, but in the quality of life those achievements created. The Vaharan's warning had become the galaxy's hope. Their failure had become everyone else's lesson. And somehow, impossibly, a salvager who laughed at his own embarrassing stories had become the catalyst for it all. Tai-Sung never quite got used to that. But then again, maybe that was the point. The moment he took it too seriously, the moment he stopped being just a regular guy doing his job and having a good time, he would lose the very thing that made him able to open the spire in the first place. So he kept salvaging, kept laughing, kept living his life as genuinely as he knew how. And across the galaxy, billions of beings were learning to do the same. The forgotten relic had been ignored for 50,000 years because every species approached it as something to conquer, to solve, to master. It took humans with their messy emotions and genuine laughter to understand that it wasn't a puzzle to solve. It was a mirror. And what it reflected was not intelligence or power, but something far more valuable. The simple, profound ability to be authentically alive.